It's day 245. I just wanted to show you what the leaves look like at nighttime with a flashlight. This is a common sight these days. There's female flowers all over the place, and it's up to me to pollinate them just in case the pollinators don't show up. It's day 246, and much to my chagrin, I see spider mites all over this flower. It's one of the more promising ones, and a little bit of webbing between the petal if you look at the top center. So that's a big problem, and this petiole here is mottled too. More problems. This is a fairly common sight these days. Spider mites just all over the backside of this leaf, adult ones. You can't even see the two nymphal instars and the smaller larvae. So I should really put this in a trash bag. I'm going to do that right afterwards, but I'm doing some pruning. I just sprayed again with an old bottle of beta-cyfluthrin at 0.05% from Bayer Advanced, and this was always the problem area. I left some leaves on there when I did the great transplant because I wanted vine 1 to get a head start, and I had nearly pruned away all the leaves. If you look elsewhere, the leaves are much greener. So there's a trade-off there. If I had pruned away too many leaves, the development would have been slower. So, it's hard to say what you should do, but I would say prune away the diseased leaves if you can. This one actually stayed open for almost 3 days, so I would say the average is maybe 2 days for a female melon flower. This is a good example of a leaf you should prune away, otherwise more spider mites will spawn from it if there are any eggs on it in adults. And these leaves all have to go. So sometimes it seems like a great pity to have to remove leaves that are mostly green, but you have to do it. And this vine section is infested too. The vine itself is a little bit mottled and serves as a highway for spider mites. This leaf is okay. This one is a keeper too. This one is great. They're all in easy access positions for treatment too. This leaf looks very healthy, but it's got a little bit of webbing right over there, so that has to be treated. When these honeydew vines are big and you have a spider mite infestation, it's a lot of work to take care of them, so you have to constantly watch out for leaf mottling. Remove those leaves. I'm using a cotton swab to get rid of some webbing, and I'm bringing these vines up after I do all the pruning. So it's a continual process in this case where I'm using the balcony railing as a trellis of bringing vines that fall too far down into sight over the rail. I know that increases the chance of spreading spider mites to places that previously weren't infested, but at least they'll be easily treatable right in front of you versus several feet out of reach. Seems like we have a lot of healthy melons on the way. This is a section of vine that's pretty old, but it's been thin throughout this entire growth spurt where I over-fertilized, and I pruned away a lot of the leaves that were diseased and small, so that should promote a lot of growth. I'm going to perform a simple experiment. I'm going to use a sheet of aluminum foil to tie these two used batteries, they're AA's, to that thin vine to see if just this small amount of weight will increase the thickness, or is it determined by some other mechanism? I don't really know. If this doesn't work and I have some time, I can try a heavier thing such as a 1.25 pound weight plate. It's day 250 of this honeydew germination experiment. Wow, it's been a long time, but these leaves look very healthy. Everything seems to be going very well. Fertilized melons are getting a little bit bigger. Spider mite problem seems to be under control. This is the underside of a spider mite infested leaf. You can only see the final adult stage spider mites, and some of these might be dead because I sprayed with some other chemicals. So obviously the beta-cyfluthrin doesn't kill everything, and there's that spot there, but otherwise this is a very healthy leaf. So I made a 5-fold dilution of a typical store-bought 3% hydrogen peroxide. You want to control this nozzle for most spray bottles so that it's somewhat of a spray but a jet too. See, I used to do this, and a mist is good for getting a large surface area, but it's not very good for physically knocking off spider mites and killing them. So you don't want to do a jet purely like that either, because it's very low surface area and you just waste a lot of the hydrogen peroxide. So you want to do something like that. That would be very effective. So this approach would never work if you're a farmer with 20,000 honeydew vines, but I have 3 and lots of spare time, so I'm going to do this. It's a very safe and effective way to physically knock off spider mites and kill them with hydrogen peroxide. Also get rid of fungi, pathogens, and it'll decompose any pesticides or any residual substances on the leaves. I probably knocked off about 99% of all the spider mites and eggs on this one leaf. And if you think about it, for a creature that has a life cycle of only 1 week, even 15 minutes or 1 hour or 4 hours spent away from feeding and reproducing is a very long time if it can make it back to the leaf at all and the hydrogen peroxide doesn't kill it. I did a plant weight training experiment for a few days, I think 3 days, and this vine seems to be thicker and greener for sure, but it's not the kind of explosive thickening that I had hoped would happen, and maybe it just needs more weight, so I'll try again in the future if I have time. I just pruned away a bunch of large diseased leaves from vines 2 and 3, and it kind of pains me to prune away big leaves that could still contribute, but I think in the long term it's definitely worth it just to avoid a massive infestation of spider mites. This melon is the biggest by far. It's comparable to the last joint of my pinky finger. I think this is the only unfertilized one, and it showed very quickly. So I finally found an old paintbrush, and there's been a balance restored. There's a lot of male flowers now, and the paintbrush, I'd like a thinner one ideally. I can cut away some of the hairs on the outside. But that's all there is to it. Just stick it in and give it a few turns and use that to pollinate a female flower. This is the biggest female flower I've ever seen on a honeydew. It's got 8 petals instead of 5. I just saw this. I think a bird pecked at this pre-melon and damaged it. I can't see any other way in which this kind of damage could occur. Here's a sneak preview from nighttime day 251. So these fertilized melons are growing very, very quickly.